Oh, there we go. Okay, so first slide is around the support that's available for children and young people before they receive an education, health and care plan. So schools can provide up to 13 hours of support for children that have SEND needs, so special educational needs and disabilities, and they can provide that as part of their core offer. So it's funds that are available to schools as part of, you know, what they can offer for children with special needs. If they're getting to a stage where they're having to provide more than 13 hours, then that's kind of an indication that a child might needs that are a bit above what can be delivered in core offer, and they might be getting towards the need for a plan. So there's various services that we would expect schools to be involved in as well if they have a child with additional needs or SEND needs. And so some of the services, you know, we'd be thinking about would be STIPs. So that's the Specialist Teachers for Inclusive Practice, really knowledgeable, very specialised teachers that give support to schools around everything, really. They can work with plans for behaviour, reintegration, kind of general SEND and teaching needs. So we'd be expecting schools to contact STIPs if they were worried about a child. Linden Bridge Outreach Service. So Linden Bridge is a special school for children with ASD. So they provide an outreach service, so schools can contact them if they have a child at their school that they're worried about, they need some strategies, they want some advice. Linden Bridge can kind of, you know, observe the child within the school setting, and then we'll write a really detailed plan about provision that they think the school could put in place. We'd be looking for really robust plan, do, review cycles from schools. So we expect schools to be planning around the child's SEND needs, actually doing, so carrying out the plan, reviewing what's, you know, is the child making progress, aren't they? Is this intervention working? If it's not, why is it not working? And then replanning what they do. So we wouldn't expect schools just to keep on kind of churning out the same old plans time and time again, knowing that the intervention hasn't been working for a child. Schools have ELSA, or some schools, should I say, have ELSAs, which are emotional literacy support assistants. I've just realised that should be ELSA, and all similar. So they may have a play therapist, they have access to a primary mental health nurse, which are linked to schools, which are provided by CAMS. So if they need some advice around the kind of therapeutic or emotional needs that a child may have. There's an EP hotline that schools can call, so they can call the educational psychologists for advice. There's a hotline, I think it runs every Wednesday, but don't quote me on that. And schools also have a link EP. So there's an EP linked to all of our schools. They have planning sessions at the beginning of term. Schools will raise all the children they're concerned about, and there'll be plans put in place for those children. Again, if there's kind of OT needs, the OT service have an OT universal resource pack that's available to every school and would be the first point of call for children with OT needs. They also have a hotline, and they have a link OT as well, linked to a school. So there'd be an opportunity for schools to raise any concerns they had around a child. And if those provisions weren't enough to support, then the school can also make a referral into the OT service via a kind of portal. There's also speech and language therapists, and again, all of our schools have a linked speech and language therapist. Our speech and language therapists are really engaged in working with schools. Again, they have the planning meeting with schools, discuss all the children that schools are concerned about, and if schools are concerned, they can also make a referral into that service. So that's kind of all of the support that's available before an education, health and care plan is requested, and it's the things that we would be looking that schools have done as their early intervention as well, to ensure that actually we know this child's needs really can't be met with what's on offer. So moving on to our next slide, So some time ago, there was something developed called the LSPAR. Some of you may have heard of it. So it's the learner's single point of access is what it stands for. And it's kind of a single front door, so one place where you can go to get information. There's a group of multi-professionals that work in that team every day. There's an OT, speech and language therapist, a social worker, an educational psychologist, a quality manager, a coordinator. So they have a team of people. So they kind of work in two ways. The first way they work is they have this single front door where if you have concerns about your child in terms of their learning needs, you can call up and they'll be able to provide you and signpost you to early interventions, give advice and support, contact schools for you, and kind of put a plan in place for kind of support. The other kind of route or stream of what they do is they manage the requests for assessment. So all requests for EHCP go into the LSPAR, and the LSPAR have weekly panels where they meet and they make a decision whether a child will be meets criteria to be assessed for an EHCP. And then if a child meets that criteria, they then pass that back to the SEND team, to my team, and that's where we would request the statutory advice. And again, at this point, I know, kind of just jumping back in this slide, I said schools can contact EP, OT, SALT, but at this point, the LSPAR, if request for assessment comes in, will make if it's a yes to assess, they will make a decision. Okay, this child also has OT needs, they have SALT needs, so we also need that statutory advice as well. So the kind of the general statutory advice we get for all children is EP advice, medical advice, and social care advice. But if there's identified speech and language and OT needs or physio needs, then also the LSPAR would advise us that we need to get that statutory advice as well. So week 0 to 6. So this is the amount of time that the council have to make a decision whether we're going to assess. So a request to assess will come in, either from parent or carer or school. And that will be looked at by the LSPAR. There'll be a panel and they will make a decision whether, yes, this child needs an assessment. We don't think their needs can be met within what the school can provide in their core offer. Sometimes, and we have this 6 weeks to make sure that we can get all the advice needed. So it might be that the LSPAR might go back to school and say, actually, there's a bit of information missing here, or we'd really appreciate it if you'd complete this document because it's going to give us everything we need to know about the child. And the same for parents as well. You'll be contacted and asked, is there anything you want to add to this request? Is there anything that you think it's important that the panel should know? So as I said, once that decision's been made, you will know whether yes, we're starting the assessment, or no, the LSPAR don't think they meet criteria. If it's a no, you will get a phone call from the LSPAR and it will be explained. You'll also receive a letter about it, and you can request a way forward meeting at that point. And a professional from the LSPAR will meet with you. They will look at the further evidence you have to provide, and then they will take that back and make a decision. Actually, with this extra evidence, does it now meet criteria, or do we still think that this child's needs can be met within what the school can provide? So week 6 to 16 is where we're conducting the EHC Needs Assessment. So at this point, we've sent out letters to all the professionals requesting the statutory advice. And those professionals have 6 weeks to get that advice back to us. Now, there are some occasions due to capacity issues within various teams that they might take a little bit longer than the 6 weeks to get the advice back to us. In those instances, we do chase the professionals because we do need that advice. It's really important that we stick to our timescales, and we would kind of, if for some reason the EPs were having capacity issues or medical, we would chase them and kind of say, we really need this, can you please get this to us? At this time, you would be contacted by an educational psychologist who would be asking you for information. And again, if there was speech and language, OT, physiotherapy. If that had been requested, they would also be contacting you and asking you, you know, is there, you know, can we speak to you? Let's speak to you about your child. Give us as much information as you can. So once we have all that information, the assessment advice comes in, and the case officer prepares your case for the EHCP Governance Board. So the Governance Board is a panel, again, that is made up of a multidisciplinary team. So there is a service manager for SEND, an area manager. So in the South East, I sit on that board, and in other quadrants, my counterparts sit on that board. There's an educational psychologist, there's a speech and language therapist, there's an OT, there's a social worker, there's a health representative, and there's also sometimes school reps, depending on their capacity to be able to come. So sometimes we get Senkos and head teachers. And at this panel, all of the statutory advice will be looked at, and there will be a decision whether we're going to, yes, issue an EHC plan, or if no, we're not going to issue because it's felt that, again, needs could be met within what's ordinarily available to a school to be able to deliver what a child needs. If the decision is no to issue, you'll receive a phone call from your case officer. They'll explain in detail why it's been a no. You'll receive a letter to say it's been a no, and once you get that letter, you have your right to appeal. So at that point, you can request a way forward meeting or mediation through global mediation, and if it wasn't resolved that way, then you can launch your appeal. But where possible, we do like to manage down appeals. Obviously, we don't want to put families in, you know, a stressful situation. We want to work with you. So week 16 to 20 is when, if it's been a yes to issue, we'd be preparing the EHC plan. So at this point, a draft. So at this point is where the case officer will be drafting the plan, but they will arrange a co-production meeting with you, the school, and any other professionals that are able to attend. And at that point, at the co-production meeting, you can see the plan being kind of written and put together. You can have your input in it. The school will be inputting into it. And it's just a really nice way to kind of pull it all together and really involve you in the plan. Following the co-production meeting, the case officer would tidy it up, make sure it's, you know, it reads well, and then they would issue the draft to you. Once you have the draft, you have 15 days to look at the draft, see if you agree or disagree, comment on it. There might be some things that you want to change or move, and you would respond to your case officer. At that point, the case officer will kind of have a look at your changes that you'd like, and they will discuss them with you. So some things we might be able to change, and there might be some things that we don't agree to change in. But the case officer would explain why if we couldn't change it. And sometimes it's as simple as people might want something in one section, not another. And it might be just a case of the case officer explaining, well, the reason it goes in this section is because actually it's related to OT, and it is the physical and sensory section of the plan. So sometimes they're very small things like that. You know, sometimes they can be bigger things that people want to challenge, but again, that would be a discussion at that time. And then the changes, if we can make them, will be made, and then the plan will be finalised. And then once you have your final plan, obviously that's when school consultations would begin. So we'll be consulting at the draft stage, and once you have your final is when we'll be naming the school. And again, when you get your draft, you have the opportunity to put forward one preference for a school place. Just kind of some general information about the EHCP is that we want to really make sure that it kind of records the views, the interests and aspiration of the child. We want it to be clear and concise, and that, you know, anybody that has access to it in a school that is working with a child can pick it up and understand what's needed for that child, that it has a really good description of the child's needs. that it has good outcomes. So obviously once you have a plan, they are reviewed, and at the annual reviews we want to see that children are making progress towards their outcomes and that the provision is still relevant, and that it's delivering everything that a child or young person needs. So here we have a slide about how you'll be involved in the EHCP Needs Assessment. So I think I touched on this before, but your views and the child's views are really important. Want to make sure that you're involved in decision making, that you're kind of included in the meetings. And again, that's why we have that co-production meeting when we're drafting the plan, to make sure that we're listening to your views and opinions, and we're putting the young person or the child at the heart of the plan, because we want to make sure it's very, very child-centred, and that we're listening to what they want as well, if they're able to express their views. Obviously, we understand sometimes that can be a bit more tricky. And again, this is just more information on the LSPAR and kind of what they do. And if you go onto the Surrey Local Offer website, there's some videos on the LSPAR and some information on the LSPAR. And also on the Surrey Local Offer, you can find all of this information that I've used here about EHCPs. So that's my presentation. And I suppose now, if I'm just going to have a look to see if there's any questions so far, and then if not, I'll be happy to take questions. So when can schools what's the process for a child who's just started reception? Okay, so there's a question there. When can a school start the process for a child who's just started reception? So that's a really interesting question, actually, Elaine, because a school or a carer or parent can put in a request for an EHCP at any time. Generally, we would probably like to see 2 terms worth of evidence, and that they've done all the things that was in that second slide I showed. But if a child started reception, they're really struggling, it's likely they would have probably been known to our early years service, or maybe even Portage, depending on their needs. So it might be that actually there is already quite a lot of evidence. So it might be worth having a little chat with the school, finding out if the child had previously been open to early years, or had funding while they were in nursery, because if they'd had funding while they was in nursery, that would kind of suggest that they were quite needy in nursery. And then it might be that actually the school don't need to wait 2 terms, they've already got that evidence there really to put in a request.
Okay, good, because my concern is that if you have to wait 2 terms for evidence and you've got a child just starting reception, you've got a 20-week process. Actually, that suggests that they wouldn't really get any support until they got into year 1. Yeah. So you've got almost like a 12-month drift.
Yeah, so children in nursery, there can be EHCP requests for them. So it'd probably be interesting to find out why the nursery didn't put in a request, particularly because when children move from nursery to reception, so when they go through that key stage transfer, there's a big piece of work done on that by SEND admissions to identify the appropriate places for children with plans. So it'd probably be interesting to know, did the nursery think that actually the needs weren't significant enough? I'll be honest, a lot this year, something that I've noticed, a pattern that I've noticed with those younger children when they've come to panel, is the requests for nursery children have come in very late, and sometimes that's because of COVID and because children weren't attending, so the nurseries didn't really know the children or didn't have the information. So there's kind of a couple of things probably to unpick there, but the 2 terms worth of evidence isn't kind of a hard and fast rule. If there's clear evidence of need and that, you know, the school can evidence that they are having to give over 13 hours of support, a request can definitely put in. I mean, a request can be put in at any time, but just to give it the best possible chance at the LSPAR panel, those are the things we would suggest. But as I said, the 2 terms worth of evidence, it isn't a hard and fast rule, because if the child was already very needy in nursery, there probably is evidence there that could be used.
So if so he did have the nursery did have a year's funding for the additional support. I submitted an EHCP plan which was unsuccessful earlier. I think it was last December, actually, last November, December. So it's just really a query, because he does have OT needs and an OT assessment's been done by health, and that's all gone in. So it's just about, yeah, like how it moves forward. And like, I think like for everybody probably on here, if you are currently in the process, how do you ensure that at least your child has the opportunity of the best chance of success in education by having all the support that they need, and how long do you have to wait? Because I think in educational terms, losing a year because you may not be able to keep up or understand for whatever reason, that's a huge chance. That's massive for a child who may be struggling anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree. So did you put in the request to the LSPAR?
I think it might have been last November. I'm not sure the LSPAR had been. I don't know if did it go through the LSPAR? Probably did actually.
Yeah. So did they? So they would have fed back to parent why it was a no. Do you know? Did that then get fed back? Sorry, say that again.
It was just a letter.
Okay. And did the letter explain why it was a no?
Just said it didn't meet the needs.
Okay, so that isn't the process that they are currently put up again. So I don't work in the LSPAR team, but I know that's not the process they're currently following. They are holding, if parents want to, way forward meetings, and they are calling to explain to parents why it was a no. I mean, from what you've described, there being SALT and OT needs, it would be worth probably putting in a request again, I would say. Particularly if there's kind of really clear evidence of need. It might also be worth, I think, are you a professional from Surrey, Elaine?
I do work for Surrey, but no, I'm actually a special guardian.
Oh, okay. I was going to say on my screen, I think it's come up
yes,
that you're sorry. I was going to say it might be worth contacting there's a new manager in the LSPAR, but even as a guardian, you could contact the LSPAR and discuss with them why it was a no, and that you didn't get a phone call, and that actually you feel that that needs would meet the threshold. And then I would say it's probably likely they'd say please resubmit the request.
Okay, thank you.
That's okay. If you have any difficulties, just let me know, and I can signpost you to the right person in the LSPAR, because you're absolutely right. We definitely don't want to put children in a situation where they're losing, a year or any time. We want to make sure that we're doing that early intervention and then acting at the appropriate times when needed. I think I'm just going to keep looking at these questions. So Denise, you said, is the 13 hours school support 13 hours a week? Yes, it is. Yeah. So that's what a school will have available to them for any child that has SEND need. And then if they're going above 13 hours, that's when they would put in a request. They would think, okay, this is above what we can offer. Okay, is that something that's happening for
for our child? It's just really interesting because I've not heard that 13 hours before. It's probably interesting. It's a good bar for us to be thinking about and to be speaking to the school about as to where our son falls with that.
Yeah, okay, brilliant.
Thank you.
And then Steve said, we've struggled to get the school to agree to apply for an EHCP. The SENCO has finally agreed in year 4 to support our application. Is the process different for a parent-led application? Steve, thanks for that. Yeah, so actually you can apply yourself at any time. So you don't have to wait for the school. But what I would say is it is really good to have the school on board, because the LSPAR will contact them for information. And obviously we don't want the school to delay kind of, I'm not saying they would, but, it'd be, did they say why they didn't think or why they didn't apply previously?
They said that they didn't feel he met enough of the conditions which were on the application.
Okay. And in terms of the things I've described today, do you feel that he would have met those conditions?
Yeah, we felt it for a while. I think what's happened is, due to lockdown and COVID, his attainment has dropped significantly. And this might be why that the school are now deciding to support it. But he's moved into year 4, and the teacher in year 4 has supported it. It seems to be the change of teacher has been the kind of spark that's started it, because teachers before have dealt with the disruptive behavior in class, but this one has, I don't know whether it's her experience or whatever it is, but has quickly said, yes, we do need to support the application.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's really good they're supporting it now, and just do, for everyone here, if you really are, concerned and you really think that actually your child might meet the criteria for an assessment, you can put in a parental request. You can, that is your right to do. As I said, it's really good to have the school on board because they will provide extra information, but you can make a parental request. I suppose the other thing just to say around that, Steve, is sometimes what I see a lot at panel is that sometimes we have a big rush of like year 5 and 6 children with EHCP requests. And what I think happens is our primary schools appear to be really nurturing, they're very inclusive. And they really kind of protect the children. And then when they're getting towards moving to secondary, and schools might think, okay, they're moving into a much bigger environment now we think they might need it. Sometimes they kind of manage the child's needs up to that point. So that's sometimes what you see as well, which could be potentially, Steve, why they've taken a bit longer. It could have been that in year 1, 2, 3, they were managing your child, but now they've got to year 4, they're thinking, okay, let's plan ahead. Also, particularly as you said, attainment hasn't been probably what you would have wanted it to be because of COVID. That is probably why they're now putting it in.
Yeah,
and then
sorry, I think the expectations now are raising as he's going into year 4, and he's slipping so much further behind his peers.
Yeah,
it's becoming even more obvious.
Yeah,
so
and
do you think though that if there's going to be lots of applications from primary school aged years 5 and 6, that we're not going to get lost in the mix, are we, where there's so many applications? Do you think, is there some advice you would give us? Because we've kind of sat patiently waiting to try to get this done, because we wanted to get the school on board 100%. If we've waited too long, do you think we should put something
No, not at all. No, I don't think you've waited too long at all. And I suppose just on that note, no matter how many applications we get, they are always heard at panel. So please don't ever worry that if you feel that there might be a week where there's lots of them, they won't be heard. They are always heard, no matter how many they are, because it's a statutory duty that we have to ensure that we are taking it very seriously. So even if there's, loads in one week, we will still always hear them all. And that's the same for the governance panel. Obviously, by the time it gets to our panel, a child's already been assessed, and it's whether we're going to issue a plan. And it doesn't matter how many cases we have that week, we always hear them all and discuss them all. But Steve, yes, no, I absolutely don't think, I think you've done the right thing. You've taken the advice from school. I'm sure they've been putting lots of early intervention things in place. And, you could always discuss with them, what early interventions have you put in place? What outside agencies have you contacted? Have you had STIPs involved? Have you had, Linden Bridge involved, if that's appropriate for your child? Have you contacted the EP hotline? Have you discussed this with the Link EP? So there's lots of things sometimes that schools might be doing that they just might not necessarily be discussing with you. So there are always things you could ask as well, just to reassure yourself, oh, actually, this is being done, there is provision in place for my child. There's a really good plan in place. And when that plan, when it's clear that actually the gap's kind of widening and the plan isn't meeting the needs, we know the school will put in a request.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. I'm just going to go to the next question. So Patricia said, for how long can a child with special needs have an EHCP? So the EHCP lasts from age 0 to 25. If a child or young person at that point chooses to go to university, then a plan would be ceased. If a young person, when they get older, goes into paid employment, the plan would be ceased. But if that's not the case, the plan does last from 0 to 25. And then Elaine said, who refers to the educational psychologist and what exactly do they do? So who refers into the educational psychologist, I suppose, would depend on what part of the process you're in. So the school can refer to the educational psychology team. They have a Link EP. The Link EP for the schools meet with schools termly, and they have planning meetings. So schools at that point would raise any children they were concerned about, discuss, get a plan in place. They can call the EP hotline, which I think it's definitely once a week. I have a feeling it's on a Wednesday, to get advice around you know, the child and, you know, things that they may be finding a challenge at school and what they could put in place. If there's been a request for an assessment and it's agreed, then it would be the send case officer from my team that would send the request for statutory advice to an educational psychologist, and then you'd be assigned an educational psychologist and they would contact you, contact the school and arrange a time to carry out their statutory assessment. Is that okay, Elaine? Does that?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, and then I think, oh, hold on, I think somebody's just, oh, thank you, Ellie, you've put when the oh, brilliant, thank you. Did anyone else have any other questions?
Hi, yes, it's Julie. Sorry, I can't find how I type on here.
Oh,
so.
no worries, that's absolutely fine. I know what it's like on Teams. It can be tricky.
So yeah, I just have a question. We're a little bit further down the line. So our little one is in year 6. Yeah. We've just got the draft for his educational plan. Yeah. And on that, he was actually, well, we've been advised that the local authority's recommendation is for a mainstream school with a SEN unit.
Okay, yeah.
Which we disagree with at this point. So my question really is, obviously we have to let the process go as it is at the moment. So we've put our preference for what school we would like. And now we know that we have to wait till February. And I think, if I understand correctly, the local authority will obviously speak to the school that we have named. And so when we finally come to the stage where, if the local authority is still saying the mainstream school with unit, and we're still saying that we think a SEND school is what we need, how successful is it usually when you then have to appeal against that? I'm hoping it doesn't come to that stage, but it's just what we'd be looking at.
Yeah, no, I understand. So probably a couple of things there. So just a couple of questions for you before I answer, because there was a couple of things there. Is this a brand new EHCP? Or
it is, yeah. It's taken us a very long time because to be very honest, we actually thought we had one for our little one, because he did get lots of support in school, one-to-one. It's only come to light now that he didn't actually have anything in place. So it's all been a bit confusing, because we're doing the educational plan to get him through year 6.
Yeah.
And we're also looking at secondary schools as well. So it's been a bit muddly.
Thank you. No, that really helped me answer. So the 15th of Feb date that you're talking about is the date for key stage transfer. So any children going from reception, going from nursery to reception, any children going from year 2 to year 3, and any children going from year 6 to year 7, and any children also going from year 11 into college. They're the key stage transfer years. So the 15th of Feb date is the date the local authority have to let you know what transition school your child will be going to. So you find out earlier than children that will go through mainstream admissions, because your children have SEN needs, they're more vulnerable, and therefore they get kind of priority in terms of school places. So that's that 15th of Feb date. In terms of where you are currently right now in the process, I'm guessing you've got a draft plan. Would that be right? Yeah. Yes. So you've got a draft. So that's the point when you have your 15 days to think about the draft, whether you agree. So you know already you don't agree with the unit placement recommendation. As you said, you can make a preference for a school, even if it's not a school or a type of provision that the local authority have recommended. we will still consult with them, because we have a duty to consult with your one parental preference. So whatever you put forward to your case officer will definitely be consulted with. At this point, it would probably be worth speaking with the school, seeing if they agree or disagree with the centre placement, but getting what evidence you feel that you could and why you disagree with that, and asking for a way forward meeting. And then at that way forward meeting, you can have that discussion with your case officer. It might be that actually then they take away your evidence and they put it back to the governance panel, and the governance panel will look at the evidence and think, well, actually, we can see now with this, we didn't have this available to us when we made the initial decision, but now we've got this extra evidence. Yes, we can see why this wouldn't be appropriate. Or equally, they may look at it and think, no, even with this extra evidence, we think we've made the right decision. In terms of appeals, I would say that appeals are very successful for parents, you know, and it's absolutely your right to appeal. If you are appealing B&F, so that's kind of the needs and the provision, then you can kind of go through global mediation, and we will have mediation with you to try and resolve it. If you are only appealing section I of the plan, so only the placement, you don't necessarily have to go through global if you don't want to. You can just carry on with your appeal. So it would depend if there was other sections of your plan that you were unhappy with. But probably the best thing to do would be to contact your SEND case officer. Are you from the southeast? Is it someone from my team, or is it a different quadrant?
Yes, southeast.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you contact your SEND case officer and just say you'd like to have a way forward meeting and discuss the decision on the centre, and then you can have a discussion with them, and then they can always put it back to the governance panel, and that it can be re-looked at. Right.
Yeah, because I thought that may be the case, but when I did speak to him the other day, because I did also query the amount of hours of support in year 6, because on the educational plan it was actually less than what he was getting without the educational plan. So that part was fine. We went back and they came back with more hours, thankfully, so that part of it. But it just seems to be that at the moment, the message I'm getting is that I can't really do anything about the local authority's recommendation. Let it take its process, and then if they're still saying that in February. So if I now contact my caseworker and ask for this way forward meeting, then I would be able to give, because he said we can't give any more evidence at this stage. Well, I can, if I was given the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. If you send me an email, what I'll do is I'll forward it on to his manager, because all the case officers have a senior case manager. So if you send me an email, I'll forward it on to, and just say you know, that you were at this meeting, just so I remember, because I do get a really high volume of emails. And then I will contact his senior case manager and just say, you know, can we actually have a way forward meeting on this one, because parents got extra evidence to provide, or special guardian has extra evidence to provide, and then we can move forward.
The email is the one that we've been getting these messages through.
It's just emma.harkin, and then the same as all the Surrey ones, at surreycc.gov.uk. I'll put it in the at the end. I'll put it in the chat.
Lovely. I think I can view the chat. I just can't write in it.
That's no worries. Okay, that's great. That's great. Yeah, and then we can see how we can move that forward. Again, I'm not promising anything, because it will depend on what evidence is presented. But we can definitely, you know, where possible, like I said earlier, we want to try and manage down appeals. We don't want to put people in a situation where they have to appeal. We really want to work with you, you know, for the best outcome for your child, and we don't want to put you through unnecessary appeals. So yeah, we'll definitely try and see what we can do.
Thank you.
I'm just going to have a look, because I think I may have missed a couple. Right, the next one I had is hi Ellie. Oh, it's the introduction. Can we get a copy of the slides? Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Yeah, you can get the slides. That's about the consultation. What is the difference between the support a child is given by health to what is offered by the council. Sorry, Elaine, could you just explain that one to me? I think it says, what is the difference between the support?
Yeah, no, I just sort of wondered, because obviously my grandson's under the community OT service, but obviously I'm aware that Surrey has OTs, and so it's almost like, I don't know, where do the two meet? Because obviously schools can have an OT link worker, but then obviously, like my grandson's got a 12-month support from the community OT service, and I just wondered how that all works.
Yeah, so with our speech and language, I'm just going to give you a bit of background. Our speech and language used to be NHS, but they were brought in-house, and now they're Surrey. So they basically are NHS, but they were brought in-house, so now they're employed by Surrey. Our OTs are still CFHS, so they are still kind of NHS community employed. So it will be the OT you have will be from that same umbrella, so to speak.
Oh, okay.
So it's likely that, you know, I meet with an OT manager weekly just to go through statutory advice. Is anything going to be late? What's happening? Is there any places where we're not delivering therapy based on what the plan says where we should be? And a lot of them. So the southeast of Surrey, I have two separate managers because I have the kind of Reigate and Banstead side, and then I have the kind of Tandridge and Mole Valley side. But yeah, again, the same for the other quadrants. All the OTs work for CFHS. They're not in-house Surrey ones.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. And then Karen said, send officers seem to change regularly. Staff turnover seems to be high. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that is true. It does often feel like there's a high turnover of send case officers. A lot of times what happens is there's lots of secondment opportunities in Surrey, so people are seconded in other roles. There's lots of development opportunities, and sometimes we have people that do go on to more senior positions or do, you know, leave for whatever reason. Also, we were hit, well, I know I'm talking for the southeast alone, we were hit by COVID, and we did have a number of staff that had COVID and also still have long COVID that have been really poorly. So it can sometimes feel that send case officers change, and I know actually how difficult that can be when you feel like you've built up a rapport with somebody and they understand where you are in the process and you know your child, and then that changes, and you know that is, you know, I am very sorry for that. I know it can be frustrating. Sometimes it can't be helped. We're doing a big recruitment at the moment. We have interviews next week, so we're going to have a lot more case officers in, and hopefully that will kind of reduce some of that staff turnover. But I am sorry if that's been frustrating for you or difficult, because I do understand when you've kind of given your heart and soul and explained your story to somebody, and then in 3 months' time it's somebody new, that can be frustrating.
Thank you. That does seem to have been the case, and that's for my younger daughter, and we're now starting the process with my elder daughter, who is actually in year 9 now. So we're hopeful that we are going to get an EHCP for her, but obviously it feels quite late in the process.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it can be really challenging, particularly if you've been fighting for a long time to get support and you've had to wait. And again, sometimes it depends, because sometimes, you know, for example, with girls, we know ASD girls, sometimes they don't start really presenting until they're about 14, then it really becomes noticeable. I'm not saying that's your situation, but, you know, there are kind of various, and it might be that you've noticed things for a period of time, but they've masked when they've been at school, so schools say no, they're absolutely fine when they're here, there's nothing wrong. But then we know when they, you know, they get home, there's big meltdowns. That's really difficult to manage. And actually, if there was support at school, the meltdowns might reduce at home, and sometimes that can be vice versa. So yeah, that can be difficult if you've been waiting, but I'm glad that the process is starting for you now. So has the request gone in for your daughter?
It's going in October half term. I think we've paid for assessments to be done, to have some evidence, and the school supporting us as well.
Oh, that's good. That's brilliant. Then that will go into the LSPA, and then they'll make a decision on whether an assessment is needed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Were there any other questions? No. I'm not sure anyone else has any further questions. It's been really nice speaking to you all. Really nice. I know sometimes it can feel like a really long and difficult process. Oh, actually, I think Sarah, did you have your hand up? Hi, Sarah. I think you've got your hand up, but I think you might be on mute. Oh, hand's gone down. I'm just going to type in the chat just in case you're having technical problems. I think somebody's typing. I'll just see if that's Sarah, if she wanted to ask something.
Hi, sorry.
No, that's fine. Did you want to ask a question?
I've got a little person at home with me who's off poorly, so I'm trying to ask. But darling, why don't you just go and watch the telly? Sorry. Tricky situation. I've missed some of it, but I just wanted to ask. My daughter currently has a full EHCP in mainstream, and I just wondered how easy it is. So you might have answered things like this before, but to be looking, she's year 4, but to be looking further down the line, how easy it is going to be to be able to look at different schools. Yeah, I guess that's it. I know sort of sometimes schools get put forward, but at the moment she's got 32.5 hours, so she's got full support at
okay, so that would kind of suggest
going forward how easy or not it is to think about the future and whether I might need a different type of school.
So the fact that she has full-time support does suggest, 32.5 hours is a really, really high level of support. So that just does suggest that there's a real need there. If you have a mainstream place and you want to consider a specialist place, your EHCP is reviewed annually. So every year there's an annual review, and the school should organise that and invite your case officer, any professionals involved. They can invite speech and language, OT, EP, or anyone that's involved with the child, virtual schools, any person that's involved. And at that annual review is where you could state a preference for actually you don't think mainstream's meeting your child's needs anymore, and you think something more specialist is required. Once the school have written up the annual review, they would send that paperwork into their case officer, and the case officer will prepare the case for the governance board, and it will come, and that's when there'll be a decision on whether actually, yes, we think this child might need a move to special now, or it might be suggested, let's try and hold this child in their mainstream school until they move to secondary, and then secondary we recommend a change. But that would kind of to be the way to go about it. I just said the EHCP is reviewed annually, and it is, but if for some reason your child is really struggling at school and school are really struggling with them and they have an EHCP, a school can always call an emergency annual review, or you can ask school to call an emergency annual review, and that would be because they're really struggling, or you think your child's really struggling. You can't wait the year for the annual review, and that you actually need kind of a discussion now about needs and kind of the future. So those are kind of the options. I hope that helped. I know you've got a little one there, so you might not be able to, I know you might be kind of distracted, but I hope that helped. Did that make sense?
No, that is helpful. Yeah, no, that is really helpful. I think yeah, you're right. I have got a yeah. But I think for me at the moment, it is positive. We managed to get the EHCP during COVID last year. So part of me is concerned, not in a negative way, but that's, we were given the full hours, which is great. She transferred from infant to junior during that time, and the school now are doing brilliant. She's kind of managing, but I can just see into the future, managing with the full support and what's going to happen. I guess my other concern is that some of the assessments maybe weren't able to be done as thoroughly and as in person. And I've got the review coming up in March, and I think part of me is, and also there still seems to be quite limited in terms of who's able to do assessments when you've already got an EHCP in place now. So part of me is worrying, I suppose, maybe unnecessarily, that what might happen in March at the review and whether things may be tried to be pulled back. Whereas actually I think it's something, I think it's the EP, the Educational Psychology School. I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to get more evidence, I guess, during this year, and is whether they're likely to pull back, whereas I think she's doing kind of okay because she's got the support, but also going forward, I think it might need more input. So it's lots of things I said.
No, not at all. No. So absolutely, school can invite the EPs when they organise the review. But the other thing is, I'm sure the EPs, when they were doing advice during COVID, were putting in a clause that said this has been done during COVID, and at an appropriate point we'll be able to do a follow-up. So it could actually be that you might want to contact the EP hotline and just say, my statutory advice was delivered during COVID, and actually this clause was kind of written into it, and I'd really like a bit more kind of advice now. You know, I'd like this kind of to be updated. So you could also do that.
That's really helpful. And to be fair, I haven't tried this term, but so it kind of went through in March, and all last summer I was hoping that would happen, but at that time they were only getting involved for, I think, new EHCPs. I haven't tried this term, but maybe I need to. I know the Senko's got her on the list to be able to discuss with the EPs. And
brilliant. That's always really helpful.
Thank you.
That's great. Deborah, I can see you've got your hand up. I'm just going to answer a question Karen put in the chat because she put it in there a second ago, and then I'll come to you. So Karen, I think you said it has been said that the time of year can influence whether an EHCP is granted, depending on whether there's any money left in the pot. So just to let you know, it doesn't matter what time of year a request comes in terms of there being money in the pot. You know, the money's there for children with EHCPs or that need, and it could come in any time of year. The only thing that does influence a bit, and this is just something to be mindful of when you're discussing with your schools and Senkos, is if they put the request in on the last day of term in July, it's then the summer holidays, and that's the 6 weeks. And that means the EPs, when they assess, don't really actually get to see the child in the school setting. The OTs don't get to see the child in the school setting. The speech and language therapy service at term time. So again, sometimes then there's almost guaranteed late advice. So again, nothing to do with whether you'll be given an EHCP or not, but just in terms of getting really good quality advice, you might want to encourage schools, if you're having those conversations with your Senkos, to not put it in at a time when they know it's a holiday. Doesn't mean you can't. Obviously you can. There's no rule in the code of practice that says you can't put an EHCP request in at this time. You absolutely can. It's your right to. But just my advice would be, you know, putting it in right at the end of July isn't the best thing for you or your child in terms of getting really good quality advice, just because people aren't going to be able to see your child in their school setting. Does that kind of answer that?
Thank you, yes.
Great, thank you. Okay, Deborah, I think you got your hand up.
Yeah, so it's just really also sort of a query about the statutory assessment period. And this is in relation to educational psychology. And I do appreciate that the service is in a lot of demand. So the school put in a request for assessment on the 6th of July. It was agreed that there would be a statutory assessment period. So we're now in week 13 of the overall process. There's still no date for the educational psychologist to come into school. The caseworker is aware, and I'm quite sure that she will be chasing. I just wondered how long it might continue, the process might continue. The phase 2 deadline was the 27th of September. So we're past that. We're now into week 13. Yeah.
So we really like to stick to our 20-week process. It is a statutory process. Some of our services do have some capacity issues at the moment. So the case officer would be regularly chasing that team to try and get a date. So have they haven't even kind of arranged a date to see your child yet? Is that?
No, I spoke to the case officer last week, and I'm in regular contact with school. I mean, they're brilliant. They proactively contact me as well, and in fact they were in touch with me yesterday, and we, as far as I know, have a date yet, unless it's happened today. We don't.
Okay. And is it a southeast case? Is it one for my quadrant?
Comes under northwest send team.
Okay. If you wouldn't mind dropping me an email, I'll contact the area manager in that team for you, and I will ask, can she please raise with the EP managers in that quadrant to see if they can at least get a date for you. Is that okay?
That would be brilliant. I mean, she had been referred by school way back in the spring term, so she's been on the radar for quite some time. But yeah, it's just wondering how long it would take. So your email address, is that going to be available somewhere?
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat now to see if you've got it. There you go, I've popped it in the chat. So obviously I'm the southeast, so if there are queries about another quadrant, so for example, if you can just put your northwest, Deborah, then I can send that on to the northwest area manager, and then she can speak to the EP managers and the case officer and the senior case managers, just to try and at least get you a date. I mean, I think you need a date at this point, definitely. We don't want you waiting that amount of time to get your statutory advice. And the thing is, it can't go to the governance panel without the EP advice, because that's going to inform the decision making, and we want to give the child the best opportunity at the governance panel. So it would be kind of pointless putting it to the panel without the information, because we can't make a kind of informed decision. So we'll do our very best to get you a date.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Emma. It's appreciated.
Thank you. Thanks. I think there was Patricia on the screen earlier, but didn't have your hand up, but you came on the screen. Did you want to ask a question, Patricia? Was there any other questions that anybody had? Hi, Patricia. Did you want to ask a question? Oh, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. I was just checking, because I know sometimes people have technical difficulties with the hand and stuff. Was there any other questions anybody wanted to ask? No. Okay, well, it's been really lovely to meet everybody today, and I know that sometimes it can feel like a really